Good morning, everyone. On this September 26, 2020, I'm really pleased to welcome you to this reading by Martin Espada. I think Martin is one of the major poets in the United States, and I'm really pleased to have him here. Before I actually finish this introduction, I do want to thank Sue Balick and Smita Desai for all the work they put into the technical part of getting this on, and also thank the New Jersey State Council on the Arts and the Passaic County Community College for their support of the Distinguished Poets series. I will say that Martin Espada was born in Brooklyn, New York. He has published more than 20 books as a poet, editor, essayist, and translator. His forthcoming book of poems from Norton is called Floaters. Other books of poems include Vivas to Those Who Have Failed, The Trouble Ball, The Republic of Poetry, Alabanza, A Mayan Astronomers in Hell's Kitchen, Imagine the Angels of Bread, and City of Coffee and Dead Radiators. He is the editor of What Saves Us, Poems of Empathy and Outrage in the Age of Trump. His honors include the Ruth Lilly Poetry Prize, the Shelley Memorial Award, the Robert Creeley Award, the National Hispanic Cultural Center Literary Award, an American Book Award, an Academy of American Poets Fellowship, the Penn Revson Fellowship, and a Guggenheim Fellowship. The Republic of Poetry was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. His book of essays and poems, Zapata's Disciple, was banned in Tucson as part of the Mexican-American Studies program, outlawed by the state of Arizona and reissued by Northwestern. A former tenant lawyer, Espada is a professor of English at the University of Massachusetts, Amherst. And I want to say Espada's poems, I could hear a poem of his 10 times, and it always makes me cry and gasp. I hope you'll have the same response. Let's welcome Martin Espada.
Thank you, Maria. Buenas tardes. Not quite, it's not quite noon yet, but welcome to everyone. I also want to add my thanks to Maria Mazziari-Gillen, great friend, and also thank you to Sue Balick and Smita Desai for making this possible. Thank you, Passaic County Community College. I'm going to be reading 5 poems in the next 30 minutes, roughly. And I want to point something out about these poems. 2 things, to be exact. One is that all of them are indeed included in my forthcoming collection, Floaters, which will be published by W.W. Norton in January of 2020. That's the advance reading copy. However, 4 of these 5 poems are also included in the current issue of, yes, the Patterson Literary Review. There it is. That is to say, issue 48 just came out in 2020. So there you go. I want to begin with a poem called Jumping Off the Mystic Tobin Bridge. It takes me back. I was a tenant lawyer in Greater Boston. Specifically, I worked for a program called Su Clínica Legal, a legal services program for low-income Spanish-speaking tenants in Chelsea, Massachusetts, right across the Tobin Bridge from Boston, a gateway city, a city of immigrants. At that time, 3 decades ago, the immigrants were coming from Central America, fleeing the wars sponsored by the Reagan administration. They were also coming from the Spanish-speaking Caribbean, Puerto Rico, and the DR. Here, I find myself in a situation where the same immigrants are now coming across the southern border, or at least they did until recently when that border was shut down. And those immigrants, as you know, have been demonized, to put it mildly. So here are some reflections, past and present. Jumping off the Mystic Tobin Bridge. I close my eyes and see him, windmilling his arms as he plummets from the mystic Tobin Bridge, to prove me wrong, to show me he was good, to atone for sins like seeds in the lopsided apple of his heart, but mostly to escape from me in the back of his cab, a Puerto Rican lawyer in a suit and tie. I hated the 111 bus, sweltering in my suit and tie with the crowd in the aisle, waiting to hit a bump on the mystic Tobin Bridge so my head would finally burst through the ceiling like a giraffe on a circus train. I hated the 111 bus after eviction day in Chelsea District Court, translating the landlords and judges into Spanish so the tenants knew they had to stuff their clothing into garbage bags and steal away again, away from the 40-watt squint that followed them everywhere, that followed me because I stood beside them in court. I would daydream in the humidity of the bus, a basketball hero, flipping the balled-up pages of the law into the wastebasket at the office as the legal aid lawyers chanted my name. I hated the 111 bus. I had to take a taxi cab that day. "What the hell are you doing here?" said the driver of the cab to me in my suit and tie. "You got to be careful in this neighborhood. There's a lot of Jose's around here." The driver's great-grandfather staggered off so his great-grandson could one day drive me across the mystic Tobin Bridge, but there was no room in the taxi for chalk and a blackboard. He could hear the sawing of my breath as I leaned into his ear, past the bulletproof barricade somehow missing, and said, "I'm Jose." I could see the 40-watt squint in his rearview mirror. "I'm Puerto Rican," I said. It was exactly 5 p.m., and we were stuck in traffic in a taxi on the mystic Tobin Bridge. The driver stammered his own West Side story without the ballet, how a Puerto Rican gang stole his cousin's wallet years ago. "You think I'm going to rob you?" I said, in my suit and tie, close enough now to tickle his ear with the mouth of a revolver. I could hear the sawing of his breath. He still wanted to know what I was doing there. "I'm a lawyer. I go to court with all the Jose's," I said. Stalled traffic steamed around us, the breath of cattle in the winter air. "Where you going for the holidays?" the driver said. I thought about Christmas Eve in court, eviction orders flying from the judge enough to translate the English of the summons, did not answer to their names. Every year, the legal aid lawyers told a joke about the Christmas defense. "Your Honor, it's Christmas," I said to the driver. "I will be spending Christmas right here with my fellow Jose's." The driver shouted, "What do you want me to do? Get out of this cab and jump off the bridge?" We both knew what he meant. We both knew about Chuck Stewart, the last man to jump off the mystic Tobin Bridge. Everybody knew how Chuck drove his wife to Mission Hill after birthing classes, the flash and pop in the dark when he shot her in the head and himself in the belly. Everybody knew how he conjured a black carjacker on the crackling call to 911, the way the Mercury Theater on the air conjured Martians in New Jersey on the radio half a century before. Everybody knew how 100 cops pounded on door after door in the projects of Mission Hill, locking a black man in a cage for the world to see, like the last of his tribe on exhibit at the World's Fair. Everybody knew how Chuck would have escaped cashing the insurance check to drive away with a new Nissan, but for his brother's confession, the accomplice throwing the Gucci bag with makeup, the wedding rings, and the gun off the dizzy bridge in Revere. Everybody knew how Chuck parked his new car on the lower deck, left a note, and launched himself deep into the black water, how the cops hauled his body from the river by lunchtime, and I walked into the office to tell the secretary, "Chuck Stewart just jumped off the mystic Tobin Bridge." I said nothing to the driver. I almost nodded yes in the rearview mirror. I confess, for a flash, I wanted him to jump. The driver, the cops, the landlords, the judges, all wanted us to jump off the mystic Tobin Bridge, all wanted us to sprout gills like movie monsters so we could paddle underwater back to the island, down into the weeds and mud at the bottom, past the fish-plucked rib cages of the dead, the rusty revolvers of 1,000 crimes unsolved, the wedding rings of marriages gone bad, till we washed up on shore in a tangle of seaweed, gasping for air. Last night, still more landed here, clothing stuffed in garbage bags to flee the god of hurricanes flinging the houses into the sky, or the god of hunger slipping his knife between the ribs, not a dark tide like the tide of the Mystic River, but builders of bridges. You can walk across the bridges they build, or you can jump. This next poem is the title poem of the collection. It's based on a photograph that went viral a year ago last summer. Two Salvadoran migrants, father and daughter, drowned crossing the Rio Grande River. It sparked grief, outrage, and also trutherism, denial. The title comes from the term commonly used to describe those who've drowned crossing over by the Border Patrol. Floaters. Epigraph. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and ask, have y'all ever seen floaters this clean? I'm not trying to be an ass, but I have never seen floaters like this. Could this be another edited photo? We've all seen the Dems and liberal parties do some pretty sick things. Anonymous post. I'm 1015 Border Patrol Facebook group. Like a beer bottle thrown into the river by a boy too drunk to cry. Like a shard of a styrofoam cup drained of coffee, brown as the river. Like the plank of a fishing boat broken in half by the river, the dead float. And the dead have a name. Floaters, say the men of the Border Patrol, keeping watch all night by the river. Hearts pumping coffee as they say the word floaters, soft as a bubble, hard as a shoe, as it nudges the body to see if it breathes, to see if it moans, to see if it sits up and speaks. And the dead have names. A feast day parade of names, names that dress all in red, names that twirl skirts, names that blow whistles, names that shake rattles, names that sing in praise of the saints. Say Oscar Alberto Martinez Ramirez. Say Angie Valeria Martinez Avalos. See how they rise off the tongue. The calling of bird to bird somewhere in the trees above our heads, trilling in the dark heart of the leaves. Say what we know of them now they are dead. Oscar slapped dough for pizza with oven blistered fingers. Daughter Valeria sang, banging a toy guitar. He slipped free of the apron he wore in the blast of the oven, sold the motorcycle he would kick till it sputtered to life, counted off pesos for the journey across the river, and the last of his 25 years, and the last of her 23 months. There is another name that beats its wings in the heart of the trees. Say, Tanya, Vanessa, Avalos, Oscar's wife, and Valeria's mother, the witness stumbling along the river. Now their names rise off her tongue. Say, Oscar y Valeria. He swam from Matamoros across to Brownsville. The girl slung around his neck, stood her in the weeds on the Texas side of the river, swore to return with her mother in hand, turning his back as fathers do, who later say, I turned around and she was gone. In the time it takes for a bird to hop from branch to branch, Valeria jumped in the river after her father. Maybe he called out her name as he swept her up from the river. Maybe the river drowned out his voice as the water swept them away. Tanya called out the names of the saints. But the saints drowsed in the stupor of birds in the dark, their cages covered with blankets. The men on patrol would never hear their pleas for asylum, watching for floaters, hearts pumping coffee all night on the Texas side of the river. No one, they say, had ever seen floaters this clean. Oscar's black shirt yanked up to the armpits, Valeria's arm slung around her father's neck. Even after the light left her eyes, both face down in the weeds back on the Mexican side of the river. Another edited photo. See how her head disappears in his shirt, the waterlogged diaper bunched in her pants, the blue of the blue cans. The radio warned us about the crisis actors we see at one school shooting after another. The man called Oscar will breathe, sit up, speak, tug the black shirt over his head, shower off the mud, and shake hands with the photographer. Yet, the floaters did not float down the Rio Grande like Olympians showing off the backstroke, nor did their souls float up to Dallas, land of rumored jobs and a president shot in the head as he waved from his motorcade. No bubbles rose from their breath in the mud, light as the iridescent circles of soap that would fascinate a 2-year-old. And the dead still have names. Names that sing in praise of the saints, names of flower and blossoms of white, a cortege of names dressed all in black, trailing the coffins to the cemetery. Carve their names in headlines and gravestones they would never know in the kitchens of this cacophonous world. Enter their names in the book of names. Say Oscar Alberto Martinez Ramirez. Say Angie Valeria Martinez Avalos. Bury them in a corner of the cemetery named for the sainted Archbishop of the Poor, shot in the heart saying Mass, bullets bought by the taxes I paid when I worked as a bouncer and fractured my hand 40 years ago, and bumper stickers read, El Salvador is Spanish for Vietnam. When the last bubble of breath escapes the body, may the men who speak of floaters, who have never seen floaters this clean, float through the clouds to the heavens, where they paddle the air as they wait for the saint who flips through the keys on his ring like a drowsy janitor till he fingers the key that turns the lock and shuts the gate on their babble-tongued faces, and they plunge back to earth, a shower of hailstones pelting the river, the Mexican side of the river. Well, times of hate call for poems of love. And that's what this next poem is all about. It is for my wife, poet and teacher, Lauren Marie Schmidt. It's called A Bod with Concussion. Epigraph. Poverty is black ice. Naomi Ajala. You leave me sleeping in the dark. You kiss me and I stir. Fingers in your hair, eyes open, unseeing. You leave me asleep every morning, commuting to the school in the city at sunrise. The landlord's driveway, a muddy creek. Ice is over hard after the freezing rain clatters all night. Your feet fly up, your head slamming the ground, an eclipse of the sun flooding your eyes. You sleep under the car. No one knows how long you sleep. You awake with 100 ice picks stabbing your eardrums. You awake, coat and hair soaked, and somehow drive to school. You remember to turn left at the Smith & Wesson factory. The other teachers lead you by the elbow to Mercy Hospital, where you pause when the nurse asks your name, where you claim your pain level is a 4, and they slide you into the white coffin of an MRI machine. You hold your breath. They film your brain. Concussion. The word we use for the boxer plunging face first to the canvas after the uppercut blindsided him, not the teacher commuting to school at sunrise in a Subaru Crosstrek. Yet you would drive, ears hammering as they hammer in the purgatory of the MRI. A week before, Isabella came to you in the classroom and said, "Miss, I cannot sleep. 3 days, I cannot sleep." Her boyfriend called at 2 a.m. and she did not pick up. At 3 a.m., a single shot to the head put him to sleep, and he will sleep forever, his body hidden beneath a car in a parking lot on Maple Street. The cops, the television cameras, the neighbors all gathering at the yellow tape carnival of his corpse. You said to Isabella, take this journal, write it down. You don't have to show me. You don't have to show anyone. On the cover of the journal you bought at the drugstore was the word dream. Isabella sat there in your classroom at your desk, pencil waving in furious circles. By lunchtime, as her friends slapped each other, Isabella slept, head on the desk, face pressed against the pages of the journal. This is why I watch you sleep at 3 a.m. when the sleeping pills fail to quell the strike meeting in my brain. This is why I say to you, when you kiss me in my sleep, don't go. Don't go. You have to go. Okay. I'm winging it a little bit on the time. I'm going to read 2 more poems. Okay. This next poem is for the poet I talked about in the workshop. We used one of his poems. This is for Jack Agüeros, my second father, and it's called Flan. For Jack Agüeros, 1934 to 2014. I was 8 when the blackout struck and the lights died all across the city like a massacre of fireflies. In the projects of Brooklyn, I steered myself to 14F, fingers spread across the cool tiles of the hallway, past the concrete and chicken wire terrace where I once burnt ants with a magnifying glass. Many years later, at the Chinese restaurant uptown, Jack said, "They got any flan here?" He was my first poet. I had seen the fireflies in his sonnets blink and float away. Fulano, the philosopher in the unemployment line. Blanco, the painter, painting in the madhouse. Monteroso, the dealer killed by shotgun in a bar on Avenue A. His mother, the seamstress, and the quick needle of her sewing machine. Jack, the moving man, his hands sliced raw. He stacked his apartment with dictionaries in 3 languages. I knew the raconteur's grin with every tale. Raúl Juliá was a friend of mine, a Puerto Rican playing Macbeth. He took 14 curtain calls on opening night. Maybe he would tell me now that flan was not Puerto Rican or Mexican or Spanish, but Chinese, invented by a trembling cook to satisfy the palate of an emperor in the Ming dynasty. No flan, Jack, I said. This is a Chinese restaurant. 2 minutes later, he said, "They got any flan?" I showed him the dog-eared and fingerprinted menu. "No flan," I said. When the waiter unfurled his pad, Jack said to him, "You got flan?" He sang this song for an hour. The egg roll was not flan. The fried rice was not flan. The fortune cookie was not flan. "Can we get some flan?" he said. "God damn it, Jack," I said. The poets crowded into the bar, striding to the mic. Jack stood with poem in hand, read the title, tilted his head, and said it again. Studied the page as if the words shriveled up like ants burnt under a magnifying glass, then sat down. I witnessed the massacre of fireflies. A few of us clapped, not knowing what to do, with our hands staring at the sonneteer who lost all his quatrains and couplets in the denim jacket he left on the subway, the words of Fulano still waiting on the unemployment line. The faster you spin, the stiller you look. There's something to learn in that. But what? After the diagnosis, I handed Jack a book of poems. He dangled the book upside down like a stiff mouse by the tail, something we would sniff behind the refrigerator. I wanted sonnets. Jack kept singing the chorus of a song, "Get me to the church, get me to the church, get me to the church on time." At the end, I leaned over Jack's bed to read his own poem in his ear, but some words come home after the blackout, fingers crawling on the wall. I know what I should have said at the Chinese restaurant. Jack, let's get some flan. We should have braved the subway at rush hour, strap hangers rocking all the way to 14th Street and 8th Avenue to La Taza de Oro, gone now, like Jack. For rice and beans, squid in its own ink, café con leche, flan, Jack. A spoonful of flan for you, after all the years of sonnets and bread for me. The steam rising when your hands crack the crust of the table. I'm going to read one more poem, and forgive me if I run over a couple of minutes past the noon hour. Again, thank you to everyone who made this possible and everyone who is listening now. This last poem actually doesn't appear in PLR, but it does appear in my forthcoming book, and it's called Letter to My Father. We recently marked an anniversary, the third anniversary of Hurricane Maria. This is a poem about two hurricanes, Hurricane Maria and Hurricane Trump. We can still get rid of the other one. Letter to My Father, October 2017. You once said, my reward for this life will be 1,000 pounds of dirt shoveled in my face. You were wrong. You are 7 pounds of ashes in a box, a Puerto Rican flag wrapped around you next to a red brick from the house in Utuado where you were born, all crammed together on my bookshelf. You taught me there is no God, no life after this life, so I know you are not watching me type this letter over my shoulder. When I was a boy, you were God. I watched from the 7th floor of the projects as you walked down into the street to stop a public execution. A big man caught a small man stealing his car, and everyone in Brooklyn heard the car alarm wail of the condemned, he's killing me. At a word from you, the executioner's hand slipped from the hair of the thief. The kid was high, was all you said when you came back to us. When I was a boy and you were a god, we flew to Puerto Rico. You said, my grandfather was the mayor of Utuado. His name was Buenaventura. That means good fortune. I believed in your grandfather's name. I heard the tree frogs chanting to each other all night. I saw a banana leaf and elephant palm sprouting from the mountain's belly. I gnawed the mango's pit, and the sweet yellow hair stuck between my teeth. I said to you, you came from another planet. How'd you do it? You said, every morning, just before I woke up, I saw the mountains. Every morning, I see the mountains. In Utuado, 3 sisters, all in their 70s, all bedridden, all Pentecostales who only left the house for church, lay sleeping on mattresses spread across the floor when the hurricane gutted the mountain, the way a butcher slices open a dangled pig, and a rolling wall of mud buried them, leaving the 4th sister to stagger into the street, screaming like an unheeded prophet about the end of the world. In Utuado, a man who cultivated a garden of aguacate and carambola, feeding the avocado and star fruit to his nieces from New York, saw the trees in his garden beheaded all at once like the soldiers of a beaten army, and so hanged himself. In Utuado, a welder and a handyman rigged a pulley with a shopping cart to ferry rice and beans across the river where the bridge collapsed, witnessed the cart swaying above so many hands. They raised a sign that told the helicopters, Campamento Los Olvidados, Camp of the Forgotten. Los Olvidados wait 7 hours in line for a government meal of Skittles and Vienna sausage, a tarp to cover the bones of a house with no roof as the fungus grows on their skin from sleeping on mattresses drenched with the spit of the hurricane. They drink the brown water, waiting for microscopic monsters in their bellies to visit plagues upon them. A nurse says, "These people are going to have an epidemic. These people are going to die." The president flips rolls of paper towels to a crowd at a church in Guaynabo, Zeus lobbing thunderbolts on the locked ward of his delusions. Down the block, cousin Ricardo, Bernice's boy, says that somebody stole his can of diesel. I heard somebody ask you once if Puerto Rico needed to be free, and you said, "Tres pulgadas de sangre en la calle." 3 inches of blood in the street. Now, 3 inches of mud flow through the streets of Utuado, and troops patrol the town as if guarding the vein of copper in the ground, as if a shovel digging graves in the backyard might strike the ore below, as if La Brigada swinging machetes to clear the road might remember the last uprising. I know you are not God. I have the proof. 7 pounds of ashes in a box on my bookshelf. Gods do not die. And yet, I want you to be God again. Stride from the crowd to seize the president's arm before another roll of paper towels sails away. Thunder Spanish obscenities in his face. Banish him to a ruthless rainstorm at Utuado so he unravels one soaked sheet after another till there is nothing left but his cardboard heart. I promised myself I would stop talking to you, white box of gray grit. You were deaf even before you died. Hear my promise now. I will take you to the mountains where houses lost like ships at sea rise blue and yellow from the mud. I will open my hands. I will scatter your ashes en Utuado. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.
I thank you, Martine. That was a wonderful reading, and it really proves everything I said about you. It was superb. I hope I'm unmuted. Am I unmuted? Sure? Am I unmuted?
Yes,
Can you hear me, Martine? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Martine, you were wonderful. Thank you so much for your beautiful reading and for your exceptionally fine poems. You truly are a great American poet. And thank you for your amazing workshop as well. And also, I'm thinking that the talk you gave about satire and humor in poetry, if it's written down, would make a wonderful essay. and something I'd like to publish, but I'm sure that you can find another journal that would be willing to publish it. It's absolutely wonderful.
Thank you again very much, Maria. Again, as I said, you're a great friend, and you've been a great supporter of my work and everything else I do. So thank you, and pa'lante, forward we go.
Forward we go, and pray for November.
Yeah.
Okay.